Welcome to the Rig Doctor podcast, where I'm giving out remedies to soothe your ailing tone and fix your sick pedal boards. I'm your host, Mason Marangella, aka the Rig Doctor. I've been building rigs for over a decade for many of the industry's top pros, and now I'm giving away all my secrets to DIYers just like you. I'm giving away all my tricks, tips, resources, and easy hacks that I've learned over the years so that you too can build a rig just like the pros. If you want to support this podcast, you can do so by sharing it on social media, subscribing to our podcast, or following us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also support this podcast financially by purchasing one of my products, Vertex Effects, from any of our authorized dealers, or becoming a member of our Patreon page. We have several membership levels as low as $4.99 a month that give you exclusive access to private live streams and Q&As, exclusive deals and discounts on Vertex products, as well as access to new product releases before anybody else. Also, you can get personalized one-on-one phone and email consultations with me, the Rig Doctor. This could be as in-depth as troubleshooting your pedal board with me in real time, or advising you on the best way to build your next rig. As always, I don't want money to be the block that prevents you from having your best possible tone. If you cannot afford to be a supporting member of our Patreon, you can always email us at info@vertexeffects.com, and our team will grant you full access to our standard tier of privileges on Patreon, free of charge, no means testing required. We trust that when your financial circumstances change, you will let us know and become a supporting member at that time. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Blue Microphones, for providing Yeti microphones for us to record all of our podcasts with, as well as our live streams. I'd also like to thank my own company, Vertex Effects, for providing the resources to make all of this stuff happen. If you are interested in sponsoring this podcast, you can always email us at info@vertexeffects.com, and we would be happy to hear from you. So, Paul Lenders, the man, the myth, the legend, one of the premier rig builders in all of the world. I really appreciate you spending the time today to take us through your career and
a little bit, yes.
Yeah, and also some of your best practices that you're willing to share with listeners and viewers of the podcast. I want to get right into it and ask you about how you got into building systems, and the second part of that question is then how did you get into building your own line of pedals? Because not only are you a system designer, you also have your own line of effects and stomp boxes.
Yes. I built a lot of effects through the years, repaired them, put them. How do you say? They were damaged, or friends, they come over, hey, Paul, can you repair? But it started all in 1976. I built my first pedalboard. That means in that time, no YouTube, no internet, no nothing. The only thing you had was an uncle that brings sometimes from the States, the guitar player. And I was the only guy who had that opportunity to check in a guitar player, because you ordered one. Later I did order one, and it took 3 till 4 weeks with shipping. You can imagine, and that was my Bible. I saw things I never saw, and you can imagine if you 14, 15 years old, it's like the holy grail for guitar players to read. But I couldn't read English, and I teach myself. But I was always curious about how it works, Okay, I have a fuzz. What does it do? Some people talk about delays. What's a delay? In my car, the first time I heard Hendrix on the TV, it was in 1969, and it blew me away. My dad said actually to me, Paul, it's really terrible noise. It's terrible noise, but I loved it. But I couldn't say it to my dad, you know. But after a while, I bought little effects. I built my own fuzz, you know. I had an electronics guy who did radio stuff, and he had a little schematic of a fuzz. And I don't know exactly what it was, but it was in 1977 or so. I built my first fuzz. It sounds horrible. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to work with distortion or whatever. You know, I had a Ibanez Les Paul copy. That was my main guitar. And I did a lot of testing, pickups, switches, captors, all new things. And I grew into it, you know. The first pedalboard was a fuzz, a Maestro fuzz, you know, with the rolls on the side. I took it apart, I put it in an aluminium plate. I had a MXR phaser, the phase 90, I believe, or the phase 45. I had a jet Coron flanger. And I put it together. That was the first thing I built. And you play in a school band and you work with your guitars. You're gonna work, you do holiday jobs to get your guitar. And that's what makes it, I think, beautiful. Because we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have all the things they are now available for the young guys to experiment and to see. The guitar books you bought, they were just notes, you know?
Right.
And we had a record player, and on and on and off and on. I know the first time I heard Deep Purple, Richie Blackmore, I was blown away. So what he's doing there, you know? The LP is completely gone. It's completely flat. There's no rills in it. So many times I used it. Yeah, you know the story. I think every guitar player can relate to that. In the early days, in the 60s, 70s, how you gonna get that sound, you know? And I was very interested how it sounded. What is the delay, you know? The good thing was that we had a studio in nearby, and the studio was they had all the delays, the rack stuff, and a guy who said, "Paul, this is a delay. This is I like that," but nobody had one or nobody had a pedal for it. So you start in a school band. You're gonna make some Tin Lizzy music. Your first Marshall is coming, all second-hand stuff, old Marshalls, one volume, and that's it. So we had a clean sound, no distortion. So we needed distortion. We took some tubes out, made it 50 watts, and so involved in the sound. And then you 20 years old, and you played in several school bands, and you exchange your ideas with your friends. And somebody had a fuzz, somebody had a distortion. You know, the MXR Distortion Plus is a very famous one in that year. It sounded horrible, but that was the only thing you had.
Right.
And we didn't have the money for a wah-wah pedal, so I did experimenting with the tone controls on your guitar. You know, that was actually the poor man's wah-wah pedal. Otherwise, we didn't have a pedal for it. So, and I lived in a fairly small town, like 40,000 people, but we had just this very small music shop, but they only did organs and, you know, that kind of stuff, no guitar stuff. And you go to high school, you come into a lot of guys who work with effects, or that guy had a distortion, that guy had a flanger, that guy had that one, and you combine it, and then you're gonna earn some money, some holiday jobs to buy it. But where to buy? And we had, I was in that time living like 200 kilometers away from Amsterdam, and there were all the beautiful shops. But I have to go with the train over there, and I got 50 guildens in that time, and I couldn't spend any money on that. But somehow I managed to get all the effects. And I'm building. I sell to my friends. I go back to Amsterdam, bought a new one, and that was growing, you know. I was the guy in the 80s who had all the sounds. He said, Paul, how do you do the delay sounds? Or how do you get your talk box sound, that mouth tube, you know? If you know Peter Frampton...
Sure.
Show Me the Way. It was actually the first record I bought for my girlfriend. And I bought the record for her, and I bought myself a mouth
Peter
tube.
Frampton Comes Alive?
Yeah. So I was, in my area, one of the only guys who had a mouth tube. So then you come in the bands, and they ask you, hey, Paul, can you play with us? And it's a long story short. I'm now nearly 60 years old, and I'm still hooked on effects, on everything in between. I worked with studios, I worked with all the great gear. That's the nice thing about my job is that I get a lot of pedals in, and a lot of amps, a lot of guitars, and every time I can work with beautiful pieces of gear. Sometimes it's a little bit less, but the most of the time, all the guys now, these days, know what they buy. Because everything is on the internet, everything is documented, you know. But I only say to the people, try out yourself. Just try it. Find out yourself if it's sounding or not. And I think it's now more easy to get an idea how something sounds. The first time I heard a slicer pedal, you know, it's like a sequence, I thought, what's this? And it's not that long ago, but I love that kind of stuff. There are so many new guys building rare and vintage stuff and beautiful effects. The only thing I have to mention is that not all the boutique gear is recommended in pedalboards. As a standalone, it works, but if you put it in a chain, you get a lot of problems.
Yeah, and it kind of leads me into I'm gonna ask you actually quite a bit about that sort of stuff and a few questions that I have prepared for you today. But one of the things I wanted to know, kind of, you know, building off of your history, is what did you feel was sort of kind of the critical moment for your company, you know, the Guitarsystems, that really kind of helped launch you and really make this a business? Was it working with a specific group of artists, or was it just kind of a slow build of gaining more and more popularity in Europe? How would you describe kind of what, you know, made this go from a hobby to a real profession where you were making a living from this?
I was making a living as a musician. That means in the younger years, I played a lot. I did hundreds of concerts. And I had a lot of problems live. I worked in a little music shop as part-time. I repaired guitars, repaired amps, helped guys with sounds. And that was around 1990, something that. I worked in a little shop and I did repairs. I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of professional guys. And in the meanwhile, I played a lot, concerts, a lot of gigs, traveled a lot through Europe. And I had a lot of experience playing live. And I think that's a very important thing for me, why my job is, or my business is running that good. I'm a guitar player myself, and I'm also a technician. I had two hobbies. That was guitar playing and the electronics behind it. And I made from both hobbies my job.
Right.
And around 2000, I make a little bit short for you, but there's a lot of happened, but about 2000, I decided to, okay, what am I gonna do? I still work in the music shop, or I can put my knowledge to effort with other guys. And my girlfriend that time, they said, Paul, why don't you make your own business? You have so many people coming to the house, and you do repairs, and it's all friends and things. And I thought, okay, I don't want to start a music shop, but where the music shop stops, I wanted to go take off. You know, sometimes you buy a piece of gear in a music shop, and the guy behind the shop, he said, you have to read the manual. I don't have time for that. Now, that was the point for me. Okay, can I help that kind of guys who have problems with reading the manual, or trying to understand MIDI or everything? And that's where my businesses actually start. I was like 40 years old in 2000, and I started my business. Mm. And first I called some guys I know from the business. I said, for guys from, hey, I do my own repairs now. Oh, cool. And from that time on, it just went up. Very slowly, but up. And now I'm 20 years later, and it's still growing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you do excellent work. You know, I mean, everything that... I've played some of your effects because one of our mutual friends is Michael Thompson in LA here, and he has quite a few of your pedals, and so I've got a chance to play some of them there, and they're excellent and very very well made. I haven't seen any of your systems in person, but they look incredible, and certainly.
Yeah,
you know,
that is a combined thing. I played in the 70s with a friend of mine, and it's called NERD, and that New Effects Research Development. And he was a friend of mine, or he is a friend of mine. And in 2005, he came over to me, and I wanted to have an extra pair of hands. I thought, okay, I'm gonna ask my old school friend if he can help me with electronics. He was a dad of 3 girls, and he was in the normal working area. No gigs, no concerts, but we played together a lot in the early days. And in that time, we started to ask about what can we do with old effects. And I had a lot of old effects in stock, and he said, Paul, can we do something with that? And actually, I wanted to have my own buffer system, like 24 volts buffer in the beginning of the change and at the end of the stage. And he said, I like to make a treble booster or something. Okay, we put some old stuff, we give him, and he's starting to build the effects. And we had a lot of fun at evenings that he has the evening off. He come to the shop, and we testing, and we tried, and we adjusted, and the idea was growing to make our own effects. And gladly we had some good contacts in the business. For me, I know a lot of guys, and I went to LA to the NAMM. I had a friend, Lon Cohen from Lon Cohen Rentals.
The rental studio.
Yes. Yeah. And I visited him a few times, and he invited me to a lot of people, like Brian Ray, Paul McCartney. He tested out the effects. Michael Thompson, he tested the effects. And the guys loved it, because Art was the technician behind the sound. And I was the guy who makes it workable in the systems. Mm-hmm. Like, we had a fuzz that had ACE control. That means you can put it active, passive. Because I had a lot of customers with effects racks. And if you know, silicium is okay, but if you have a germanium fuzz and you have a line signal in front of it, it doesn't work.
I won't like it.
Yeah, it
So
sounds
would you
horrible.
create some sort of like unbuffering on the input to allow it to work in a rack?
Yes, we had a system designed, or Art designed a system, and he was an audio engineer for his profession. So we combined that, the live situation from my side, and the technical side from Art, and design wise, looks and feel was my part, and we did it together, and we had a lot of fun to build. And
Do you still work together on your new projects for pedals?
yeah, I have to say, I was about 5 years ago. I met a girl, and she lived more than 200 kilometers away from my hometown. So I moved with the complete shop 200 kilometers away. So that was at the first it was a little bit difficult, but now we have good contact, and we're still designing new stuff. We are working with MIDI and software and USB and all the iPhones situations, and we still designing. We still in the background. We still design, and we have a good contract. It is. I was moved away for 200 kilometers for my love of my life. So, you know the story. A guy, go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
well,
actually, it is very nice to tell. She's now my cable girl. I have one of the most beautiful employees of the world. I have my own girl who's making my cable stuff.
Yeah.
Soldering the patch cables, the power cables, everything what you want. She makes it. So, and we can work together.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's
yeah. It was always a nice thing to think about, but if you have a girl reality. And she can make your cable work, that's great. So that's why I'm more than 200 kilometers away from home.
Yeah. So if a client comes to you, for example, and wants to build a rig, what does that process look like? Can you kind of walk me through kind of what the building of a system process looks like if you're having a Paul Lenders system made?
Mostly it's an intake. I find it very important to ask the guys, what kind of music do you have already a system? Are you singing? Are you experimenting with new effects? Do you have a lot of effects at home? I make a list what they have. I make, let's say he has 2 amps. Okay, do you want to play live 2 amps or 1 amp? Okay, can I play 2 amps? Yes, you can play. So it's a system that's growing, It starts with a list what they have, and then we're gonna sort out what we can do with the system. For instance, a guy tells me, Paul, I have a fuzz, I have a volume pedal, and I have, let's say, a delay and a reverb. I say, okay, how do you want to use your volume pedal? Like a roll off, like a volume on a guitar, or you want to use it like Steve Lukather uses. Luke uses it
volume
after the preamp. Yes. Yeah. And then they have a volume pedal like 250K, and they don't work in a line signal,
right? Or
not good enough.
Yeah, because they need 25K or 10K or
something like that.
Lower impedance.
And then we're gonna take out some effects. We put some new in, and we design a complete new system for him. What's fittable for his music? Yeah. I find it very important that some guys ask me, Paul, I want to have a lot of MIDI effects. Okay. And I asked the guy, can you work with MIDI? Do you know what it is? No, but I heard about it. Okay. Do you like to read manuals? No. I hate them. Okay, then you have a problem. If you don't want to read the manual, don't even bother to start with MIDI.
Yeah.
Or you have so much money that you can pay me to make movies and manuals on video. I have customers, they ask me, Paul, can you make me a few videos how it's working. I can't work with me. So this is all in the intake part that I sort out if the customer is actually can work with the stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't like the program, yes, don't buy a switch plate.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people ask me, Paul, I have bought a switch plate. So, okay, do you have a computer? No. What? You don't have a computer? I have customers, they don't have computers at home, or at least no computer hookable on MIDI gear. Yeah, then you're lost. And if you don't know how to program a switch plate GL, then you have a big problem. So, I got a question in. Okay, I want to have 2 GLs. Okay, I have one GL board. Do you have a smart insert? What's that? They don't know what they're buying. You know, you have the old system and the new systems are with smart inserts. You know a little bit about the GLs.
As far as the switching matrix thing that they do?
Yeah, you can hook up an input and an output together. It gives a control number. And let's say you have a Bob Bradshaw RS10, a reliable pedal, and you give one of the switches a control number like 16. Now, then you have your switch plate have to connect with the RS10. And if you don't know how to program, then you have a big issue.
Yeah.
So, and that's all in the intake. I try to filter out if the guys know what they're doing. No? Sometimes it starts in the head. It starts with the guitar. Is the guitar good enough? Some guys, I said, I want to play blues. I said, okay. What kind of pickups you have? What kind of amps? Yeah, I play a solid state. Okay. What kind of solid state? Yeah, a cheap one. Yeah, maybe try to buy a tube amp. Maybe try to adjust your guitar. You know, all the small things make a sound or not. And this is all in the intake, in the email with the guys, WhatsApp. They ask me about rigs. I'm now working on a system like Eventide's 2290s. He asked me, Paul, I want to have an 80s rack, an old rig like all the stuff Mike Lando uses.
Right.
And he has all the gear gathered through the years. But they have them in a warehouse and they can't use it because they don't know how to hook up the system. Right. So he gives me a list. I'm going to make a drawing for it. I take out some stuff what I think, okay, that's not working. Give him an advice what he can buy or not. And it's always on the customer itself. For instance, he works at home with a Helix. Okay. I say, you have an 80s rack, but do you want to combine it? Yeah, that would be nice if it's possible. Yes. We make a rig that you can use the old and the new together. So we decided to put a Helix rack version into the 90s rack. And then we have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Maybe I can show you a little drawing.
Yeah, show it. Yeah, show us there with the screen share. That's the beauty of Zoom.
Wait a minute, I'm gonna try.
Just go to screen share on the bottom menu.
Yes, I have to. Wait a minute. Oh yeah. Share screen. I have to go to the desktop. Oh, wait a minute, is this? I have to experiment a little bit, sorry.
That's okay.
Here you can see.
Yeah, can you blow that up, Paul, just by hitting the green circle in the corner?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you can see the whole thing. Awesome. Oh, beautiful. Okay.
This is not ready yet, but he has several amps.
Okay.
Let's say he wanted to use a DBX compressor. The Helix is now on the moment, the preset situation is in the first preamp rack. This is the preamp rack, the custom audio preamp. He has a line mixer, a 4x4, The line mixer is in the other rig. And then we have tremolo and how do you call it? A Black Cat 5.
Okay.
Then we're gonna make a power supply for it. Then we are looking for an expand for the RS10 because he has 2 less control numbers.
Okay.
And now I can let you see what we up to. Wait a minute. Moment. I have to adjust a little bit.
Okay.
Where it is. It's a big rig. Oh shit. I can check if it's working. Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, take your time. This is no rush.
Wait a minute. You can see this?
Not yet. You have to share your screen again.
Oh, share.
There you go. Okay. So this is the rack you showed us.
Yes.
This is the right side was what was in that diagram, and it looks like there's now.
I'm working on the design on the left rig, and it takes a little bit, but you can see PCM 70s 2 times, line mix from customer from Bob, VHT for the stereo effects, the 4000 or 3000, I don't know, the Tarek from Full Tone because the Dyna piano was a little bit noisy. TC2290, 4x4, used with switch outs and loops, and a power supply, a conditioner, just to get everything powered. And we are working.
And are you making your own? Are you making your own MIDI switchers there on the bottom?
Yes, we. Wait a minute. I'm gonna try if we can do this. This is the 4x4. Oh, the RS10.
The RS10, yeah.
Yeah. A few years back, I made a gas pedal, and it's a fairly complicated system. It works a little bit like Bob's system. Only the point is, it's very expensive to build.
Right.
So I built about 25, 30 pieces. I have still 1 or 2 left. But it was too expensive to build.
Mm.
Yeah, and
so these are just kind of leftovers that you had from the initial ones that you had
but
made.
It works really great, and everybody who works with it still works with it.
Got it.
But the good thing about what Ad, my colleague from Guitarsystems, and me, we're designing a new one, and that's on the bottom, but it's a little bit new, so you heard as the first. And we're starting up to build a new MIDI system, because a lot of people like to have a MIDI board, and it must be modular, you know, like systems.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and this is the prototype.
That looks great.
Yeah, we can do a lot of that, and a lot of programming, free programming. But yeah, that's the thing for later. Let's say.
That looks great. Well, so it really sounds like you're doing a lot on the kind of upfront with your clients to really kind of get really clear about what it is that their needs are, and then and so you're not spending time backtracking or having to redo things, and that probably saves you a lot of headache in the long term. I have another question for you, since you've been doing this for so long. What's the biggest sort of advance that you've seen, maybe technologically speaking, since you started your career in the industry?
You mean what's the better products? The good thing is that the technology is that good on the moment. I just to name a few, the fractal audio. A lot of guys like to use the fractal audio nowadays. It's easy, it's compact. It's you can do the software at home. You can program it. You have a camper amp. There are a lot of more the Helix, for instance, and I embrace that kind of technology, because I still have to program the things for the guys.
Right.
So it's not that I don't have work anymore, because it's even more work.
Right.
Yes, because
Yep.
you can get a box like a fractal, and you can take a lot of stuff out of the internet. But if you're going to play live with your band and you sound like shit with a fractal, then you don't get it, you know. And that's why they call me, Paul. I can't work with it, so I like that.
Yeah.
I have my own thoughts about it. The good thing what the Fractal did is that they have a very big engine in it. So the capacity of making the sound is of course very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I don't know how to say it in English. It's a calculator. They have a big machine in it.
Yeah.
And I talk about the fractal, but more firms make stuff like that. I have to watch out what I say about what's good or bad, because I try to be neutral in this field. You know, I have a customer. He works with a Helix, and he said, "Paul, I love the thing." Okay, that's your thing. And they're gonna ask, I want this and this and this. I say, okay, then you have a problem. You need something else. But for the 99%, I gonna get the best out the gear what they give me. Yeah. Sometimes I give advice. Okay, you have an old phaser, the phase 90, the phase 90. Okay, you have a buffered system. You know, if you use a phaser in a buffered system and you hit the phaser on and off, you have bad sound or good sound. You get a sound dip, we call it.
Yeah.
And that's all the things then advise, okay, maybe buy a good one from Retrosonic, or buy something what's okay, what works in your system, you know?
Right.
It's the same about buffered or true bypass, you know. If a guy comes to me, Paul, I have 5 pedals, I said, okay, we're gonna do a true bypass. If you love it, no problem. But sometimes I get pedal boards with more than 30 pedals on it. You have to buffer, otherwise you have no sound.
Right.
I give you an explanation or an example of a pedal board, a big one. Maybe I can do this. Yes, I have to share. That's a good one. Wait a minute. Oh, no, it's my... Okay, I have to put the screen up. Watch this. Can you see this?
This is big. Yep. Lots of pedals.
Yeah. There are 2 gig rigs.
Okay.
For 20 loops.
Another one is underneath the other.
Wait a minute. I'm gonna let you show the other one, the open one, and you have to do a close look. You see something familiar, I think.
Okay.
Wait a minute. There's the boost pedal in it.
Yeah.
The Vertex. But you can see how many pedals there are.
Yeah. Pull it up there when you have it. I can't see it yet.
Oh, wait a minute.
Just make sure you share the screen.
Oh, wait a minute. I have to share. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Share screen like this and this one.
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, I got it. It's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see it? So
I see it.
And this is actually a few weeks designing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Each pedal has its own problems. Each pedal has its own sound loss or boost. I have to discuss with the customer how he wants to have it, what's MIDI, what's not. And if you see the drawing, wait a minute. Share screen. I have to, sorry.
It's okay. Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute. You can see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
This is actually the drawing for it.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, how long did it take you just to do that drawing?
No, I'm very good with Photoshop and Illustrator, and
Yeah.
it's my third hobby.
Yeah.
I love to do drawings, and it's for me also a good thing that I know everything where everything is. You know, I can see
Right.
if you have that kind of amount of pedals, you want to be sure everything is working.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he's certainly got a lot of stuff here.
Yes, and this guy, he knows what he wants. And if you can see, there are Pete Cornish pedals in it. There are Origin Effects stuff. For Vertex is in it. The
Providence and
Strymons
Neighbor.
are in it. Mission, MIDI driver, gig rig. Everything is in it.
He's got more than one compressor. One before gain and one after gain.
Yeah, and one is always on in the front, together with the Echoplex or the booster. And the second one is more for funky stuff. You can actually put, because both works on 18 volt, so they have enough headroom. And the beauty about this, if you put your guitar on the left side, on the right side in, on the right side, you have no signal loss.
Yeah. Wow.
I can send you the drawing if you want. I think
Yeah, this is great.
people love this to see. Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's impressive for sure.
Yeah, and you have to know, I made hundreds of boards, and every board was done like this. For instance, I built a smaller board that was, I hope you can share a screen. No, this is not a good one. Yeah, this is actually done with a Musicom. And it's a famous player here in Holland. And he asked me, Paul, can you do a board with a Musicom, 2 H9s, and a compressor? And
Paul, do you have that image there? I don't see it yet on the
now,
screen.
wait a minute. I'm gonna.
Okay, sorry.
Wait a minute. I have to share this one. One moment, please. Sorry.
It's okay.
Share screen. And I need to have this one. Yes, share.
All right. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
You can see it?
I can see it.
So, Musicom Lab, I like to work with because the software is very good and the sound is okay for me and for the guitar players. And this is actually a very small board. And a drawing like this, it takes 1 hour, one and a half hour to make.
Okay.
My thing is, I know where I have to put everything. If you see the second H9 is stereo,
right?
You see on the end, so he can use 2 amps or not. He can run it into his fractal or whatever he wants to use it for, or he uses Gamper or whatever. This is actually a studio guy who tours and do studio work. Mm-hmm. And this is I can let you see a little picture of it. Maybe then you get a picture how it looks. One moment, please.
Sure.
Oh yeah, this one. Share screen. This is a good one. I'm learning.
Yeah, looks good. Oh yeah, beautiful.
You see?
I do.
And it's actually a very compact system. He uses actually a new bag from Pedal Train, and I made that on the same size. So I put my board in a Pedal Train. I would throw the aluminium away. Sorry for that, but
yeah. And on these systems, I meant to ask you: that you're building is in terms of the platforms? Are these made out of wood, or what is the composition of the material?
I use okame wood.
Okay.
And that's a very light wood. Yes, it's very steady. It's like a multiplex, but from a different kind of wood. It's water resistance, and I put a vinyl coating over it with RC illumination.
Nice.
I made a mix from paint and some isolation in it, like filtering. But the big part about the pedalboard is that you put everything on the good spot and use good power supplies.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to ask you some questions about that later. I have some questions about materials and things like that I'd like to talk to you about. But the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is about buffers, and this is one thing that I really have a lot of difficulty explaining to people effectively, and I'd love to get your impressions about it. How do you approach buffers in a system design context? How do you use them? Where do you recommend people use them? Those sorts of things.
Let me say this. If you use buffers wisely, you can put them everywhere. Only not in front of the fuzz. But if you have a Guitarsystems fuzz, you can. The voltage is the main key. The higher the voltage...
Internally in the pedal, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the voltage in the pedals are very important. If you,
so what do yours run at in...
For instance, if you see a buffer system from Pete Cornish, he works on 24 volts. And how bigger the power, the voltage, how better the sound. Some people use 9-volt buffers. It's not my recommendation, let's say. If you can find an 18-volt version, I prefer that. But I think you have to listen. Listen to, give your ears the opportunity to listen if there is a buffer needed. If you play big stages, like you have like 30 feet cable or 40 feet cable, yes, I would recommend a buffer.
Right.
And if you have an 18-volt buffer on the end, it doesn't affect the amp that much. Yeah. If you play with your guitar straight into the amp, no problem. Everything in between is a load. You have to see it as a load. If you have 38 pedals on it, you have 38 loads. Then you have to watch out where to buffer the sweet spots. And
right.
I don't buffer everything, but on a certain place. And that's, I think, for the most guys, they have to listen. Give their ears, play guitar and listen to it and put it somewhere else, or maybe it sounds better there. But to advise on the end, a buffer on a higher voltage, I would prefer.
How much do you weigh the impedance in correlation with that? Do you find voltage to be more important than the impedance of the buffer in terms of the input and output impedance?
The most buffers are very well made, and I check always the impedance from the amp. Like an old Fender amp, you have to watch out with buffers. It's my findings, but the quality of the amps these days are that good, and the buffers are that good. Yeah. For instance, Bob Bradshaw made some buffers with the brand
Dunlop.
With Dunlop. They're great. John Suhr makes something. They're great. And if you have the money and you can spend the money, I would say Pete Cornish's. I love Pete Cornish gear. Mm-hmm. Because they work on a very high voltage. I make my own buffers all on 24 volts or 18 volts.
And is that on the input, or do you use a DC-DC converter to get it internally?
The 24 volts, I use a step-up converter, but the 18-volt versions are very normal. Like
So 18 volts from the power supply come into the pedal.
Yes.
But
If
on
you
the
give them
24
9 volt,
ones,
they work on 9. If you give 18, and the buff tool actually is like 9 volt in, and step up converter till 24 volts.
yeah, like on the boost pedal of ours that you showed, that has 2 buffers in it, and those run at plus or minus 9.
Yeah,
So it has a
18
DC
volt,
DC
yes.
converter. Yeah.
That's one of the best situations to get, and that's also a buffer what Farley on the end of the big system.
Yeah.
And he uses a stereo Pete Cornish buffer, and I can't mention the price, but it's a lot. It's a
Right.
studio system. There's a studio guy who works with this, and let's say you under $1,000 you can't get it.
Right.
And he uses that on the end, and that makes the system very, very, very good.
Right. Now, do you find that there is any advantage in terms of buffers using, BJT, FET, or MOSFET, or Class A versus an op amp based buffer? Have you found there to be much of a difference that you prefer?
It's depending on the system. If you use vintage effects, you have to watch out with the digital stuff. That's just my findings, It's a very important thing to know that a buffer is just listening, and try to find out if it's working for you in your system. And op-amp based I like, MOSFET I like, because when they get a lot of input, they're gonna distort very nice.
What about in terms of for buffers though? Buffers with those compositions.
I don't. Can you?
Yeah. So for a buffer, do you find there to be any advantage of using a BJT, FET, MOSFET versus an op-amp based buffer?
No. Yeah, I know them all, but the thing is, I listen to. It has to be musical. It has to be in the. I have a lot of buffers here, and I give my ears the room to listen what sounds good. And sometimes a good buffer works with a Fender amp, and sometimes not. But it's also depending on what you go into,
Yeah.
And it's not a golden rule. Use that kind of buffer, and you're good. I think you have to try and find out yourself. I can say I love the Bob Bradshaw systems, the Pete Cornish systems. There are a lot of firms make buffers, JHS is a firm, he makes little buffers. There's TC makes someone, and
But they're pretty different. The TC one is
digital.
Well, it's an op-amp based one. It's pretty linear, I would say, than the Bonafide.
The Bonafide.
And the JHS one is it looks to be the buffer section of a Klon.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I saw it.
It uses an 082 or 072.
Yeah, but
IC.
I think for buffer wise, I give the guys an advice: try it.
Yeah.
Just and read the internet. The luxury for the new guys now these days are we have internet and you can find it.
Is there any particular specification that you would suggest people look for in terms of input and output impedance for buffers that would more likely than not be a good quality one sound wise?
If let me say this, I work with my ears. If it sounds good, I don't have any problems with the impedance. And let's say you have an output from 600 ohms, yes, a standard buffer. On the most amps, they work really great. Yeah. See, so I think that could be a very large and long discussion about how to use buffers, but I say always, if you have a guitar shop nearby and they have some buffers, try them. They're not that expensive. The only thing I wanted to say is try to find 18-volt versions, or at least a step-up version like yours.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think they need to look at what the voltage swing is internally and see what it can actually handle. Because a lot of them will run at higher voltage internally, and sometimes you can tell this if or at least what I would tell somebody is look at how much current it draws. If it's 9 volts and it's drawing 200 milliamps as just a buffer, it probably has some sort of DC converter.
I always
there.
check that all every effect I check on the voltage and the milliampere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so I have another question for you about effects loops, and this is something that really a lot of people are mystified by because there isn't any standard for impedances on effects loops and levels on effects loops. How do you deal with utilizing effects in effects loops that maybe are not designed for that purpose? And how do you deal with kind of the variability of every amplifier kind of having a different standard for effects loop impedances in levels?
Let me say, if you have an ES8 from Boss,
Boss switcher, yeah.
yeah, and you don't use buffers, and you put in MXR 90, yes, and you hit the phase 90 in the loop, you put on the loop, and you don't use a buffer, you don't have a signal at the end. There are preamps, they have a very bad sound without the buffer. And that's an impedance mismatching. And it's fairly good to hear. If you use the pedal with a guitar amp and just one guitar, and it sounds good, and you put it in your effects loop, and it sounds really bad, then there's an impedance mismatching. And very important is when somebody buys a loop system, try each effect separately. Guitar in. First loop, I put no buffers, just an effect, and the output goes to the amp. And just test every loop at itself. And if you have a movable buffer, then you would say, okay, at the phase 90, after loop, let's say loop 6, I put the movable buffer. Then I have no signal loss. So it's depending each pedal. It's not a golden rule where I have to put the buffer. You have to listen.
What about, though, in terms of amplifier effects loops? I'm meaning, like, how do you deal with pedals that are coming that people want to integrate that maybe don't work at line level, for example?
Yeah, let me say Howard Dumble amps, two rock amps, a lot of amps, they have no buffered...
Passive effects loops.
Yes, so that is a big issue. If someone is coming over with an amp like a two-rock, and they say, Paul, I have no sound in my FX loop. It's like, do you use like a twinkleator or a dumbleator, or do you have a buffered FX loop? No, I don't have. So then you have a problem. You can't work with effects in your loop. Some people have a two-rock and they want to have a Strymon in the back. That's a big issue. Then you have effects loop buffered system in your... That's why Howard Dumble used the dumbleator. You know what it is? Dumbleator?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
it creates an active effects loop for a passive effects loop.
So, in terms of amps, I like to have an amp with a really good effects loop, because the most people come to me with a lot of effects. So I have to adjust the amps to the effects or the other way around. But I like to have a good amp. And if the amps have a good effects loop, I'm fine with it. Yeah. There's a certain brand, they have leakage in the effects loop. And if you want to have a series effects loop in a certain kind of brand, and you put down just the volume, and you hear on the background the sound is going by. It's not completely quiet. And then I say, okay, this kind of amps are not suitable for my rigs. I have to be very diplomat about that, because about amps and
sure.
And I can give you a list of amps they don't work, and I can give you a list of amps that work, but it's not it's not on me to say what's good or bad, you know.
Right. Do you find there to be any benefit for a solid state effects loop versus a tube buffered effects loop?
No. If it's a good solid state effects loop with good buffers, and here's the same story with a lot of headroom, you don't have a problem.
Yeah. What do you say to people? This is another really common one that I get a lot about systems where the client wants it wired in stereo.
Use the wireless?
Well, they want to wire it in stereo, so they want a stereo system, but then they want to also be able to use it in mono. A lot of people ask about creating a separate mono mix that sums the left and right output. Do you think that is advantageous, or do you think it's better just to go out of one of the stereo outputs instead?
It's depending on the effects you're going to use. Let's say you want to use a TC chorus, the SCF.
Right, which has a flipped polarity on one side.
Yeah, but the trick is, if you leave the jack in the right output and you don't use the stereo setup, you only use, let's say you have it on a pedalboard and you have a junction box on the side and you have two cables running to the output. And you decide one evening, okay, I just want to use the mono today. You have to pull out on the chorus the right output, otherwise you have no sound.
Right.
And a lot of people,
it zeros, yeah.
A lot of people they rehearse with two amps, and one evening they come in a club and they don't have a space. I said, I'm gonna use one amp. Okay. They call me, Paul, my sound is really shit. I said, what do? I only use one amp on the left side. Okay. Go to the effect itself and pull out the right output. Yeah, sometimes in the switch itself is in the jack.
Yeah.
It's summed or not, you know?
Yeah.
You have to watch out. Some effects have internal software like the Eventides. You can route the system within. You have two inputs or two outputs, but let's say you have the first 10 programs for mono, and the next 10 programs I have for stereo.
For stereo.
You can do it in your effects and program.
Because you can pan them all the way left for, yeah. Yeah, I've been telling people that, because sometimes the summing thing can be a real problem if people go to do it, especially when they're dealing with modulation effects, because sometimes they're not the polarity is different, or the mix of the left and right is not 50-50. Even on some of the delays and reverbs, to create dimension, they might have a 40% left and a 60% right, and then if you mix it evenly, it can sound very odd, or you can have these weird, phasing issues. Yeah, yeah. What about a lot of people these days seem to really like solderless cables? What is your advice to people at home about solderless cables? I know you want to be diplomatic.
Let's say the cable is good.
Okay.
And if you, in a home situation or rehearse situation, or you want to do some quick cables, solderless is okay. But if you go on stage and you're in the dressing room and the guy from the lighting drops a gaffer tape on your pedalboard, and you have to play for 16,000 people. The guy is coming up and he has no sound on his board. The guy from the Lightning didn't tell the guitar player that a roll of gaffer was fall on his pedalboard from like 10 feet down.
Right.
The guy goes up, he has no sound. Can you imagine what you have, a big of problem that you have no sound? And this guy told me, Paul, I don't use standard cable, I use the solderers, I like it, it's okay. And he had that problem. And 2 days later, he came over to me, he said, Paul, everything out. And it's a situation, if you play in little clubs and you can manage around yourself with solderless cables, it's okay, you know. But if you have to go on big stages and you have to be reliable on stage each night again, I would not be preferring that kind of cable.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion, no?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that every professional builder that I've spoken to, not one of them has said that they recommend solderless cables. It's really I think a consumer level product for people that just need to put something together fast. You can make changes, but it's certainly not the roadworthy alternative or the thing that's going to have longevity.
Yeah, I've made. I had a guy who had a Pete Cornish based pedals, and he used the purple cable with all the solderers, and he had a lot of plugs. And he said to me, Paul, I want to use this kind of cable. I say, okay, the cable I can use, there's no problem. But those plugs I don't work with. That means if I get a guy in who wants to have solderless cables, I don't give any guarantee. If he leaves my shop, the guarantee is over. I don't give guarantee on solderless cables.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe I get a lot of trouble with it, with another firms, but it's not the thing in professional way. No?
Right.
It works in situations at home or studio or rehearsal rooms or even in a shop. You want to make some quick cables to test some gear. It worked great. If it's not working, no problem.
Right. There's not high risk, as far as the 16,000 people waiting for you to play your guitar or something.
I have a lot of professional players in my shop, and they all say to Paul, I love your gear because it's always working.
Yeah.
That's important,
Yeah.
That's my job.
Supremely.
That every night, like 60 concerts a year or 100 a year, each time it has to work. I have guys, they have my board for over 600 concerts and no problem at all. The only problem what the guy had, he bought a universal audio aux and didn't use...
Box,
he didn't use the iBox, like ground lifted. So we had a hum, and he thought the board was damaged. I get the guitar tech on the phone. I said, guys, what he changed? Or he put some new gear from the Universal Audio. Okay, if you pull out the cable to the mixer, okay, problem solved. But Universal Audio has no ground lift. It's a great piece of gear. But that's what I think is made for in studios. And those guys gonna use it live. Then they use a version maybe with a DI box, with a ground lift, So he had a big problem. He had a concert at sea, very big. And he thought, Paul, my board is damaged and I have a lot of noise. And say, give me the guitar tech. Get the guitar tech on the phone. Say, pull out the onks. Yeah, problem solved. So put in a good DA on the back, a Clark Technics or whatever where you have, a BA or whatever. Put a good, and the problem is solved, you know?
Right.
And yeah.
Because it needed the galvanic isolation for that.
Yeah, you have to, the rules of nature, Nark. If you use 6 amps, they all have to be earthed. Yeah. Otherwise, I got a problem when some guy dies with my system, and the authority sees that I don't use earth on tube amps. I can close my shop.
Yeah,
I get a lawsuit. They're gonna kill me. You know, yeah. I have to be sure that's why on a lot of piece of gear, like big rigs, if you see Rammstein or this gear has to be earthed all times.
Yeah,
it's a very important. The complete system is built on earth.
Yeah, that's
grounding,
or here we call it grounded.
Grounded earth, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry for that.
No. I think it's good. I think it's good for people to understand every possible terminology for the same thing. The other question I have for you is more about recommendations that you would recommend to do-it-yourself, kind of DIY people in terms of your recommended power supplies. What are some power supplies that you would recommend to people that are building their own pedal boards?
I have, if the board is big enough, yeah, and that means in terms from wah-wah, inductors, all the noisy stuff like touch wah-wah, all touch wah-wahs. I like to use Seox. I like to use True Tone. And I think True Tone is a switched system, and it works really good. You can build it very close to the effects without noise.
Right, because you don't have the toroid transformer interfering with the inductor on the wah and stuff like that. Yeah,
you only have to watch out with the pedal trains and transformers down there.
Right. Yeah, like a linear supply, you mean?
Yeah. Let's say if you have a standard board with some pedals. Now I have an AC-driven tube preamp what runs on AC, very high voltage, and I have a wah-wah, and he's noisy like hell. So I have to isolate the fusel or the inductor inside with mu metal. You know what it is?
Yeah, mu metal, yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, I get a lot of noise from the wah-wah pedal.
Right.
And it is coming from the pedal train.
Yeah.
It's like a big antenna.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. I have to test. I built fairly big boards with the pedal train, and I have no problem. But I have a tube-driven preamp, like the Chandler. You have to watch out.
Tube driver.
Yeah, you have to watch out because it's
you have a transformer inside
radiation. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah, you have a transformer inside the device, and you have no electromagnetic shielding in the pedals.
Yes.
For the most part, unless they're steel, I suppose.
Yeah.
But most are not steel.
Vintage is okay if you have a stereo and you use them one at a time. But if you have a vintage board, you have to watch very closely where to put everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are really noisy.
Right.
So power supply, Voodoo Lab, in certain situations, the big Mondo is good. MXR makes a good one. The 402, I believe, from Bob.
Oh, got it. Yeah. The one that's like the single rack space size one.
Mostly, I get all the pedals in from the guys and boxes or whatever, and I'm gonna measure each effect separately. Then I'm gonna decide, okay, where I put it on the board, and sometimes I use a Seox on the back, and in the front where the wah-wah pedal is, I use the True Tones.
The switching supply.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know that Chalks now makes switching power
Yes,
supplies
yeah,
as well.
I saw them. I'm very curious about them.
Yeah.
So I hope to get them in one day.
And Voodoo Lab is also making a switching supply now with the Pedal Power 3.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's coming out any day now. What cables would you recommend to people? If they're building their own rigs, what would you recommend that people use on their home built rigs if they're going to solder their own?
In the early days, I used a lot of Mogami.
Any particular model number?
Not by hand, because the problem is Mogami is very difficult to get in Europe.
Oh, okay.
There are a lot of stupid firms like PA system firms. They don't have guitar cables. They only have balance cables.
Right.
And all the firms that sell Mogami here in Holland are very stiff. They're not flexible, In the States, there are more firms that have Mogami. But Mogami, as a distributor in Holland, it's terrible. It's really terrible. So I stopped use Mogami just because I can't get it.
Yeah, the availability. Okay. And so what do you like now?
I use a German brand. It's called Summer Cable.
Okay.
Yeah. There are two kind of cables. High impedance cables and low impedance cables. High impedance, if you have all true bypass pedals, I use mostly thicker, better isolated with OC in it. And when I use all buffered signals, I can use line level. And that's the thinner summer cable,
Uh-huh. Is this all coaxial or is it twisted pair shielded or mic cable?
I don't like twisted cables.
Okay.
Sometimes it's okay, but in an amp itself, I like to use twisted cables. But I have a customer, he wants to have a rig with all twisted cables. And he had a lot of noise. And I tell him, you get the noise the same. So I took everything out, put normal standard cables in it, and it was quiet like a mouse.
So you use coaxial cables?
Yes, normal standard cables like Mogami, Van Damme is also very good.
What do you like for instrument cables, like going into your systems? From the guitar to the input of your system.
I make my own cables. That means sometimes I use Belden cable.
Which model?
Oh,
if you're willing to say, you don't have to say.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know.
Is it a coax cable?
Yes, coax, and it's very flexible.
Is it maybe 9778? Is it a popular one?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
But the same thing. Belden cable is American cable.
Yeah.
It's very bad to buy them here. Nobody has it.
Yeah.
If you go
it's hard to buy them here.
in a mileage like 100 kilometers in the area, nobody has Belden guitar cables. Nobody has Mogami. Nobody. It's really...
Maybe you can talk to your friend Mason. I can send you some. It's easy for me. Mogami cable here is like, 47 cents a foot or something.
Yeah, but you can't get it here.
Yeah. Well, I could help if you really want it. I could help you with
that. We talk about that. That's good.
Okay.
The good thing about Mogami cable is, it's when you strip it, yes, with a special tool, it works really good.
Yeah, it's very easy to prepare.
And you can, if you put it in rigs and put it in pedalboards, it works really good and fine. It's a good quality cable.
Yeah, that's what I primarily use when I was doing
I don't use it because it's difficult to get.
Yeah. What about, I'm going to ask you now about some pedals that you like that are for different style pedals. And, you can mention your own, and if there's other ones you think are worth mentioning.
I love a lot of pedals. The pedals has to be suitable in each system.
Right. What would you say are some of your favorite overdrives that you think work really well in most systems?
It's depending on what for sound you like. I'm not that type of overdrive guy. That means I use my amp to overdrive, and I hit it in the front a little bit with a treble booster or a fuzz, a medium fuzz, to get the crunch sound into lead. I've used maybe a very stupid thing. It's a very cheap pedal from Carl Martin called the Plexi. I had a lot of fun with it.
The Plexi Tone, or
Nee, the cheap one.
what color is it? Is it kind of the yellow?
Yeah, yellowish, something like that.
Yeah.
Something what you have on your shirt, something.
Yeah.
That kind of color.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, I have thousands pedals in my head, but it's a good one. I like the Edward Van Halen MXR.
Okay.
Yes. If you
the
into Van Halen sound and into that kind of rock sound, I love the Van Halen distortion. What we use here in Holland very often is a tube-driven preamp. It's called the Superdrive from Lex.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Superdrive from Lex Boss.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's black, right?
Yeah,
With
it's
white
a big
writing.
one. 3 knobs.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys like to use that piece of gear. It sounds really good. What kind of distortion? Yeah, that's a good one. I think I've heard a lot of what I like if the distortions have enough headroom.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to say something very stupid now, but I'm not a fan of a tube screamer.
Yeah.
It sounds really, really beep for me.
Yeah. What about for modulation pedals? What are some modulation pedals you think really work well in a system?
Free to tone I like.
Which modulation device do they make that you like?
They have a chorus out now, the tri-chorus type.
Okay.
I like.
Is it digital or is that an analog?
I don't know. I've heard it just once here at the shop, and I have about 2 months after the corona. I have to build a pedalboard with it, so I get it in. Then he was just very quick here at the shop, and we listened to it, and I make a drawing. Modulation, TC electronics is always good. Modulation, Strymon, they are okay.
Mobius.
I'm. It's not that I'm dislike Strymon, but sometimes it colors the sound.
Yeah.
But it's also depending what you have in front.
Yeah.
And
What about analog choruses? Any analog choruses that you like?
yeah, the CE1. I modded a lot of CE1. The gray one, the big ones.
Yeah, because the input impedance is not good for
Yeah,
guitar.
you have to change the pot. Yeah, but that's what I like. There is a firm, Retrosonic.
Yeah, sure. They make a CE1 clone.
Yeah, it's very good. If you terms of chorus,
Yeah.
flanger-wise, the Corin Jet Flanger is my favorite all-time flanger.
Okay.
I modded a lot of old MXRs flangers to 9 volt. I like them. Modulation. There are so many pedals. Well, Earthquaker makes also, I think, a very good one. I had one in last. I think there's so many brands.
What about for delay?
Delay is very easy. If you have the money, a Pete Cornish delay.
The Tape Echo simulator?
Or TC 2290, but also the free to tone. They have a 2290 based effect, but I have a lot of customers. They use the Strymon, and it's also good. I like the big. No, it's not the big car. The other one, the grey one. Time delay.
The timeline.
Yeah. I have some guys who using the DD500. Mm-hmm. We only have to watch out with the kill dry. That's not working.
The kill dry doesn't work on that?
No, watch out with that. It's terrible. If you want to run it in stereo, okay. If you want to have a triad system or wet dry, it's a little bit difficult.
Does it just not go to 100% wet?
Yes, you have a different kind of mix in it. And it works really different. You have to, there are a lot of guys talking about it, because I had one in, I wanted to try it. I said, hey, there's no parameter for it to adjust. There's no kill dry switch in it.
Huh. So do you just have to set the effect then at 100%?
100%,
mix?
Yes.
So you just put the mix to 100% and then it can do it?
Then you can do it. Otherwise, it
in a parallel mixer though.
Yes, in a parallel mixer. And Musicom Lab makes a nice one, a new one.
Yeah, I saw that, the parallelizer.
Yeah, I didn't have the chance to have it here, but maybe next time.
Yeah. I wish it had stereo input though. It only has mono in.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean.
What about in terms of reverbs? What are some of your favorite reverbs?
Yeah, if you have the money and you have a big truck and AMT plate, but I like the Eventides.
The H9.
Yeah, it's a one-trick pony, but it sounds really good.
Yeah.
And even the Space Echo, I believe, from Eventide is good. Strymon, the Big Sky, also the little one from
the Blue Sky.
Yeah, but I have some guys. They have a Boss reverb, and it works for the guys. You know, sometimes the guys don't have a reverb on the board. They have a good reverb in the amp, Accutronics, whatever. Yes, but about reverb, Digitech made also a nice reverb.
Yeah, the RV7. I actually have one right here.
The delay pedals. What Locator uses the orange.
DL8.
Yeah, I modded a few for
kill dry
stereo set wet dry setup.
You did the kill dry mod on it?
Yeah. Yes, and it works really good.
When you do the kill dry mod to those, do you cut the trace for the dry, or do you just remove the caps?
I have to. This like 4 years ago. I have to check the data, but I did a look orientated board.
Okay.
And maybe I can send you some pictures later this evening.
That would be cool. I saw you had one of those Lukather style Valley Arts guitars.
Yeah,
picture.
I bought them in LA a long time ago.
That must have been it must have been expensive. I was gonna say, if you bought it in LA, it was probably not so bad. But if you bought it in Holland, it would have been really expensive.
There was no distributor in Holland at that time.
Yeah.
In the 90s, there was a German firm. God bless his soul. He's died a few years back, and it's Tommy's guitars in Viersen, and he had a few Valley Arts in stock, but I had already mine, and I bought a second one at his place. So, yeah, nice. They play like hell, the guitars.
Yeah, do you still have it?
No, but I have a good friend. He builds lookalikes, like the blue.
Yeah, I see it.
The blue one.
Yeah.
You see?
It looks like it. Yeah.
It's my colleague. We have a firm here together. He has another room, and René Jonker guitars, and he makes beautiful as fun Valley Art type of guitars.
Nice.
We are all dudes, and we love the 80s.
Yeah, well, I was born in 1985, so I missed a lot of this stuff. But
at that time, I was already married for 2 years. Okay. That's a long time ago. Okay.
This is my last official question, Paul, and then you can go. We can talk about whatever you want, or if you need to head out.
Yeah, I have to go to dinner. My wife is killing me.
Okay. So last question is what advice would you give to any do-it-yourself kind of person that's maybe a young guitar player, they're trying to build their own rig, what's your primary advice that you would give to them if they're trying to build something as professional as possible?
It's actually very easy. One at a time. You buy a good amp. You buy a good guitar. You learn about the guitar, everything what you need to know about the guitar. You know all the sweet spots, all the dead spots, everything you wanted. You have to know about your guitar. If you don't know actually your guitar that good, don't buy any effects. You have to learn, and I have this from Tony Spinner. He played with Luke and Toto for a few years, and he's become a friend of Ad, my colleague, and me. And he told me once, Paul, each time I buy a guitar, I take it apart. I want to know every spot in the guitar. Otherwise, I don't do anything. Just plug in my guitar. I want to know the sweet spots of my guitar. The height of the pickups, the thickness of the strings, the adjustment. Everything has to be perfect. If you have that kind of stuff perfect, and you have a good guitar cable, buy your first effect. Gonna work 2 weeks just with a phaser, or just with a booster, or just with a distortion. Learn each effect separately. Then you're gonna combine them. 1, 2, play a few times. Put 3 together. 4. That you know all the influences for the pedals. Put it in front, put it afterwards, put it in parallel. Try and error is the best situation. Mm-hmm. This is the same if you buy a multi-effect. Let's say I had a guy, he's Journey freak, and is a great player in his own right, and he had a GT100. And he came to me and said, Paul, it sounds like shit. He said, yeah, can you put everything out? Try to get your guitar in and get the same sound on the back side out. If you manage to do that, then we're going to talk about effects. The problem is, you buy a multi-effect, you hit your presets, they do too much effects. Just hit everything out. Just try to get what you get in on the back. And if that's okay, add each effect and try to work with each effect, Reverb, it's okay. But sometimes when you use a holy grail, and you hit your second channel from your amp, the reverb sounds completely different than on a clean channel. Mm-hmm. So put a buffer behind the holy grail. Then you have no difference anymore. All the little things is trial and error. And I hope the people who read or see this try it one by one, not all together. Some people go to a shop buying 7 or 8 pedals. They put it on a pedal board, put 2 weekends work in it, and it's not working. So try each effect separately and then put it together. And I think when you manage that, you get a good system.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for answering all these questions, for talking about kind of your journey and how you got here, and giving all this great advice to people that are listening. I really appreciate your time, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. If you have questions, feel free to ask. It was a pleasure from my side.